The $12 trillion corridor, the Arctic secret Russia is dying to hide. The bridge alarms won't stop. New ice blooms out of nowhere, clamps the bow, and the satellite link dies. On radar, the Vilkitsky Strait is a gray smear. Outside, it's night at noon. The captain has 20 minutes to choose, burn fuel and risk the hull, or drift toward the shoals Russia controls. He calls for an escort. Silence. Then a burst of coordinates from a station he can't name. He looks at the AIS. Their ship has vanished from public maps. And here's the thing, somebody's still watching them. The question isn't where they are, it's who gets to say. The corridor, everyone thinks they understand. On the map, the Northern Sea route looks simple. Hug Russia's Arctic coast from the Kara Gate to the Bering Strait, and shave the Cape of Good Hope detour or the Suez choke. People love to say 40% shorter, like distance alone settles the argument. It doesn't. Not when hulls, ice, and permits get a vote, right? Here's where it gets interesting. The NSR's a corridor with rules you don't see on a brochure. Draft limits and ice class ratings decide who even shows up. Convoy windows, pilotage, and icebreaker escort timing decide who actually moves. And every hour the engine idles in an ice queue, the miles you save turn into money you burn. So let's talk money. People toss around the $12 trillion figure like it's sitting in the ice waiting to be scooped. What they really mean is this: add up Asia, Europe trade capable of time arbitrage, energy flows, LNG, crude, condensate, critical minerals tied to Siberian pits, and the data that wants the shortest path between markets. It's not a single jackpot. It's a stack of niches, each with its own math and its own gate. And gates have gatekeepers. Moscow says the NSR lies within national waters. Under that stance, Russia issues permits, assigns pilots, sets hydrographic fees, and crucially controls icebreaker escorts. Rosatom runs the icebreaker side and increasingly the corridor's rhythm. If you want the best conv slot in shoulder season, you play by those rules. If you don't, you wait, or you don't sail at all. Now cut through the hype and look at volume. The 2025 navigation season ended with 103 transits, carrying about 3.2 million tons, documented by High North News and the Center for High North Logistics. That's movement, sure. It's also thin compared to the grand promises. You don't rewrite global logistics with 100 ships. You learn who can make money in a narrow window and who can't. Because seasonality isn't a footnote, it's the story. Even in good months, the ice shifts. Weather compresses channels, then rips them open. Convoys stack. Escorts run hard. And every planner back at HQ whispers the one question insurers always ask: are we sure? But wait, there's more. The NSR is shorter, yes, but it's also shallower in spots, with ice-scoured bottoms and shoals that move. Deep draft giants that rule Suez don't fit this script. Arc 7 muscled hulls do. That's why LNG and condensate carriers with real ice teeth keep showing up, while big box boats mostly don't. Here's the crazy part: when Suez flinches, Ever Given wedged sideways, Red Sea missiles spiking war risk, shippers look north. The distance saved looks sweet on a spreadsheet. Then the hidden costs arrive: ice class premiums, escort fees that ratchet up with ice severity, mandatory pilots, hydrographic charges, and if the route approver says you're sailing Thursday, you're sailing Thursday. Your schedule bends to their ice. So can the world use this route without playing by Moscow's rules? That's the central question. The corridor isn't just miles. It's permissions, hardware, and timing. It's who holds the ice keys. And right now, that's Russia, backed by an icebreaker fleet nobody else has, even if build schedules at Zvezda slip and sanctions make parts harder to source. Let's put real stakes on the table. When the Suez lane clogs, freight spills to the Cape, days add up, insurance surcharges climb. An Arctic shortcut, even seasonal, would change price signals from Busan to Rotterdam, but only if people can see what's happening out there, and that's a big if. Get this: near Kara Gate, Vilkitsky, Sanikov, and the Bering choke point, ships often go dark on public tracking. Automatic identification system pings just stop. It could be sanctions pressure, sensitive cargo, or straight security. For insurers, that's a blindfold. For ports downstream, that's a guessing game. And for underwriters, higher premiums follow. Here's the lie: public silence means safety. In reality, silence is rent you pay to the coast. Meanwhile, this matters. Russian coastal radars don't go dark. Soccer 2 sites stitch a protective dome along the coast, the same network Western briefings point to as a persistent air-sea surveillance mesh. Coastal HQs light up with feeds the public never sees. Project Harmony, a seabed array from Murmansk toward Franz Josef Land, fuses hydrophones with any available AIS and satellite hints. Open-source reporting has traced these nodes across the Barents Arc. So while the world squints, Moscow's picture stays coherent. Visibility is power. If you decide who sees, you decide who pays. Now zoom out to the $12 trillion claim again. That's not a single trade lane. It's leverage across energy, metals, and data. Energy is already here. YAML LNG didn't wait for container schedules. Metals move when prices justify ice. And data, that's the stealth cargo. Europe's been pushing non-Russian backbone links and a future Arctic cable for latency to Asia, even testing political will with a 3-gigawatt Black Sea power cable project. When you connect steel and fiber, you get pricing power. If those pipes bypass Moscow, the gatekeeper grip weakens. If they don't, it tightens. So we're back at the captain in the ice, calling for an escort. The route promises days saved. The system insists on deference. The stakes: energy flows, insurance solvency, sanctions, evasion temptations, and military patience. Because commerce shares water with submarines, and misreads live in the fog between them. First red flag then, ships vanish from public trackers near key Arctic choke points. If visibility is power, someone's buying and selling it. And that's where this story really begins. The places ships go dark. Start at the Kara Gate. It's the first hinge-in from the Barents, where warm Atlantic water meets Arctic weather that flips moods in an hour. Public trackers show neat lines until they don't. Then a container feeder blinks off as it noses past Novaya Zemlya. Insurers call the operator. The answer is always vague. Satellite issue, equipment reset, nothing to see. Except there's plenty to see if you're on the Russian coast. Glide east to the Vilkitsky Strait, that narrow cut above Severnaya Zemlya. Captains hate it in shoulder seasons. Wind drives flows into a grinder, and the icebreaker convoy rule kicks in hard. Right before the lineup forms, AIS traffic thins like someone dimmed the room. 2 signals vanish. A day later, a different hull pops back on the far side, time-stamped as if nothing happened. Logbooks will say awaited escort. Thermal satellites catch a heat smear that suggests the ship didn't sit still. Farther on, the Sannikov Strait gets trickier. First-year ice here fractures into fast flows, and pressure ridges punch above their weight. You can hear them grind the hull if you stand on the bow. Public maps, though, go quiet at the same bends. One tug appears without entering, exits without leaving. If you're an underwriter in London, you're not just squinting, you're blind. Now the Bering Strait, last gate to the Pacific. Alaska on one side, Chukotka on the other, and a traffic separation scheme that looks tidy on paper. In real life, signals hop, drift, or disappear for an hour exactly when sensitive cargo needs room. Some crews say the GPS fix teleports a mile east, then snaps back. On watch, you reset the plotter and keep going. Onshore, claims departments flag routings they can't verify. Why go dark at all? Sometimes it's simple: security. Piracy isn't the threat up here, misreads are. Turn down your profile, keep chatter to a minimum, and hope you glide through the ice windows. But there's also pressure. Sanctions on specific entities mean certain cargoes draw heat if they broadcast every waypoint. A ship carrying discounted crude or condensate might prefer a smaller audience during ship-to-ship transfers near Kildin or tucked coves. Emissions rules and fuel switching quirks can also invite unwanted attention if pings prove patterns that don't fit paperwork. Here's where it gets interesting. The blackout isn't universal, it's selective. Russian coastal radars, Sopka 2 arrays stacked across islands and headlands build a protective dome over the littoral. They see air, they see sea, they stitch a picture from targets that never broadcast at all. Add coastal AIS receivers and line-of-sight VHF. Then plug in the seabed. Project Harmony's hydrophone and sensor nodes laced from Murmansk toward Franz Josef Land, flagged in open-source defense, reporting as a persistent undersea ear. Those nodes listen to prop signatures, cavitation, and the rhythm of a passing convoy. They feed coastal headquarters that don't blink when satellites do. So you get this split reality. Public trackers think a ship paused. Harmony hears it motor at 8 knots in ice cover. A logbook notes drifted for weather. A thermal pass spots movement along a convoy lane. The mismatch isn't always fraud. Sometimes it's lag. Sometimes it's a captain protecting his crew. But sometimes, yeah, it's a deliberate blind spot that moves money around maritime rules. What does that do to the market? It taxes time. Ports downline can't stage cranes or tanks if arrivals wobble by days. Insurance loads on a premium because claims teams hate black boxes. Reinsurers in Zurich, London, Tokyo lean away from risks they can't price. Letters of indemnity show up where international group cover used to stand. And when hesitation costs real cash, state actors who can carry self-insurance fill the gap. Meanwhile, buyers are quietly shopping for visibility. Satellite firms sell synthetic aperture radar scenes that punch through clouds and polar night. Data brokers fuse SAR, thermal and sparse, AIS crumbs into ghost tracks. Chinese constellations add imagery buys that refine ice maps in near real time. But here's the thing, none of it matters if the gatekeeper won't clear you. The best picture in the world still leaves you waiting if Rosatom schedules the convoy without you in it. Phantom transits become a feature, not a bug. You save face on sanctions screening. You slip a cargo transfer in a bay where cold water hides a sheen. You keep competition guessing on timing so they can't front-run your gas. And every time the lane blinks, one truth hardens. In the Arctic, seeing is a currency, and it's sold at the coast. The real toll booths, icebreakers and permissions. So here's the part nobody glamorizes. The NSR isn't pay your toll and go. It's apply, wait, accept conditions, then move when they say. The first toll is paper. You file your voyage plan with the NSR administration, list your ice class, draft, intended windows and ports. They check your hull notation, your insurance cover, your polar code manuals, and your cruise ice experience. Miss a document, you don't sail. Clear it all, and you still need a pilot, a slot, and in heavy months, an escort. Mandatory escort sounds simple until you do the math. Rosatomflot's nuclear icebreakers are beasts, but even beasts have calendars. Each ship can lead only so many convoys, and convoys only move so fast in shoulder ice. Factor in rest, bunkering, maintenance, weather holds, and sudden medevacs, and the daily capacity tightens. Everyone claiming we'll scale to millions more tons runs headlong into that arithmetic. It's not just steel, it's time. Fees stack with the weather. Escort tariffs scale by ice thickness and your hull's ice notation. Arc 7, you pay less than a weaker class, but you still pay. Then come pilotage, tug, and hydrographic charges. Need an updated route survey because a shoal migrated. That line item hits too, and the kicker conv timing rules. You don't leave because your charterer wants Wednesday delivery. You leave when the convoy forms, and if the lead icebreaker diverts to crack a rescue track, everyone waits. Now add sanctions. Western kit, navigation radars, spare parts, even some ice sensors sit behind export controls. Class societies pulled back. Surveyors are backlogged. Russia's leaning on domestic yards like Zvezda to fill gaps, but schedules slip, and specialized components don't grow on trees. Crews improvise. Operators hoard spares. That fragility shows up as risk pricing you feel in the invoice. Plot twist, priorities aren't equal. LNG carriers with Arc 7 hulls, built for this exact grind, get rhythm privileges. They move point-to-point from YAML and Arctic LNG terminals to transshipment hubs, slotting into convoys like trains with fixed timetables. Dry bulk, general cargo, you're the flex. You wait out the weather window so gas can keep its offtake promises. That's not rumor, watch the patterns. When ice tightens, gas moves. Boxes and bulk blink. Here's where tech teases you. You've got synthetic aperture radar showing flow fields in the dark. You've got machine learning spitting optimal routes. You've bought premium ice forecasts from European and Chinese satellites. And yet, if Moscow does okay your timing, your perfect plan sits in a folder. Tech only helps if the gatekeeper lets it matter. Here's the crazy part. The better your picture, the more you pay when someone else owns the key. Let's walk a day in the queue. Your master gets the convoy assembly order 063 local, north of Cape Chelyuskin. It's blowing 25 knots over the beam, wind chill cuts to the bone, and brash ice clatters like gravel. You rig for escort, line handlers ready, bridge wings manned, de-icing crews on rotation. The lead icebreaker calls speed, 8 knots, then shaves down to 6, as a ridge line opens like a zipper. Every minute slower is fuel you didn't budget. But nobody argues with the breaker. If you fall off the track, you're a casualty. Pilot boards in a sleet squall, boots crunching frozen spray on the ladder. He knows the pressure points this week, where the floes stacked, which lane refroze overnight, what the local wind did behind the islands. He also knows who's behind you in the line and who can't afford to miss their delivery window. He isn't just conning your ship, he's conning the route's tempo. And the hydrographic toll, people forget how alive the seabed is up here. Ice keels plow furrows, storms shuffle sediment. A fairway that sounded good last month grows teeth. The hydrographic service updates, but updates trail reality. You pay for surveys, you still eyeball the echo sounder like it's 1978. Now layer in administration. Your permit lists waypoints, windows, communication standards, reporting intervals. Deviate and you explain. Request a weather deviation and the approval clock starts. Everyone is polite. Nobody is fast. Meanwhile, day rates tick. Crew fatigue creeps. The chief counts filters and antifreeze like gold. Here's the money gut punch. You saved, say, 2,500 nautical miles versus Suez, but you burned 5 extra convoy days, paid escort and pilotage, ran de-icing heaters non-stop, and added a war risk premium because underwriters hate blackouts near choke points. If your cargo is low margin or time sensitive, the shortcut evaporates. If it's LNG, backed by offtake contracts and priced against Asia's winter premium, the math works, and you get priority anyway. Remember the blackout split we just saw? It feeds right back here. When Western finance pull back and premiums jump, state-backed players step in with self-insurance and reinsurance out of Moscow. They can stomach a hit Western reinsurers in London, Zurich, or Tokyo won't touch. That shifts who shows up at the toll booth. Public trackers might miss the movements. The coastal picture never does. And this is the quiet truth. Money saved in miles can vanish in waiting days unless you control the queue. If you own the ice, the breakers, the pilots, the permits, and the picture, you don't just manage traffic. You ration time. Time is the real toll. Pay it or turn around. The insurance trap that could break the route. Follow the money because the money follows fear. Up here, fear is priced by 3 lines on a cover note. P&I for third-party claims, hull and machinery for your steel and engines, and war risk for the stuff you hope never happens. If any one of those lines wobbles, the whole voyage math tilts. Start with P&I, the mutual clubs that cover pollution and people. They live on solvency stress tests. One hull grounding in a pressured flow, spill under ice, and the cleanup isn't a booms and skim job. It's helicopters, hot water deluge, ice slotting, and months of work in polar night. Do the math like an actuary. OPRC-type obligations plus fines plus wreck removal. 1 casualty can wipe the year's margin for a club, maybe 2. So clubs push conditions, ice class minimums, vetted operators, tighter reporting. Miss a box, lose the blue sticker. Hull and machinery is more blunt. Arctic steel lives hard. Prop damage from brash ice, rudder stock cracks, shell plate dents from ridge rubble, none of this is theoretical. Surveys creep from annual to special because class societies want to see the scars up close. But sanctions flip the table. Some Western-class houses scaled back. Surveyors are scarce. Replacement parts stuck behind export lists don't reach Murmansk on schedule. So your underwriter prices in delay and improvisation. Premiums rise, deductibles swell, and exclusions multiply. War risk isn't about missiles here, it's about gray zones. AIS blackouts around Vilkitsky and Sanikov spook reinsurers. Unknown to known position jumps look like spoofing. Letters come back with addenda. Notify entry, report escorts, carry extra gear, accept surcharge in heightened risk areas. You sign because you have cargo, but every clause is a tripwire if something goes wrong. Here's where the pressure hits the back office. Claims teams in London and Zurich ask simple questions that are impossible to answer cleanly. Where exactly did you deviate? Who cleared the SDS? Why did the AIS go quiet? If your logs don't match third-party tracks, and remember, harmony hears what public maps miss. You're haggling over facts, not just money. That's how reserves balloon and settlements stall. Class notation used to be comfort. Ice 1C, Arc 7, Polar class, shorthands that signal resilience. But class is only as good as the last survey, and the backlog is real. After 2022, dual-use export rules pinched sensors and spares. Some operators shifted to alternative class or smaller, less-known societies willing to take the work. That makes reinsurers flinch. They don't like unfamiliar stamps on steel that meets pressure ridges. You're not gonna believe this. Some operators just cut the Gordian knot. They self-insure. State-backed reinsurance pools in Moscow extend a net under fleets that Western capital won't touch. Premiums get internalized, losses get socialized, voyages keep clearing. On paper, risk moves off the global balance sheet. In the real world, it concentrates in one country's willingness to write checks when something tears open in ice. Secondary sanctions sit like a loaded trap. A reinsurer in Tokyo doesn't want a retrocession line tangled with a sanctioned counterparty 2 shells deep. London shops red OFAC updates like weather reports. Zurich allocates capital away from opaque corridors. Capacity thins. When capacity thins, premiums spike. And when premiums spike, marginal cargoes abandon the route. Micro story, product tanker takes a winter detour for a sanctioned blend at a cove near Kola. AIS sleeps for 6 hours. A month later, she drifts into a minor scrape. Ice scours a hole the size of a dinner plate. Contain, no spill. The hull underwriter says show the full track. The operator hedges. The P&I club asks about compliance. The bank's sanctions screen pings an affiliate. Suddenly, a small claim swells into a reputational crisis. The bill isn't steel, it's uncertainty. Letters of indemnity start to appear where IG cover used to sit. Promises on paper that trades will settle even if an insurer balks. That works until it doesn't. A winter slick under ice is almost invisible. Cold water masks sheen. SDS at night reduces eyes. If something leaks and no one can prove when or where, liability chains knot up. Plaintiffs sue everyone. Courts demand data. And data is the one thing the Arctic withholds on command. Meanwhile, the class backlog has a human cost. Surveys take longer. Crew fatigue extends while waiting for green lights. Masters keep logbooks like affidavits, anticipating cross-exams after the fact. Nobody thinks they're the test case until a bow kisses a submerged ridge and an insurer opens a special file. Now flip the lens. If Western finance pulls back, cargo patterns tilt to players who don't need London's blessing. Russian and Chinese state firms, quasi-state carriers, and niche brokers with political cover keep sailing. The market hasn't grown safer, it's just shifted who can afford the risk. That shrinks transparency further. Premiums rise for the few Western ships left, which nudges more of them out. It's a feedback loop. Here's the trapdoor. The route's credibility doesn't break from volume, it breaks from one ugly incident. One hull breach with trapped crew, one under-ice spill that lingers under snow and headlines, and reinsurers step back another mile. Regulators tighten, class hardens rules, convoys slow, and every spreadsheet that said NSR saves 10 days gets rewritten as NSR not now. So who blinks first? Not the ice, not the bill. It's the capacity behind the signatures. As long as risk is priceable, ships sail. When it isn't, distance doesn't matter. The corridor closes without a single buoy moving. China's near-Arctic bet and the silent partnership. China didn't wake up one day and decide it was an Arctic power. It eased in quietly with science flags and data buoys, then followed the numbers. In 2018, Beijing put it in writing. The Polar Silk Road, research shipping energy, near-Arctic, not Arctic, but close enough to matter. On paper, it's cooperative. In practice, it's a hedge against choke points China doesn't control. Start with the anchor, Yamal LNG. Chinese capital and offtake locked that project into Beijing's energy map. Not just equity, long-term purchase deals, charters on Arc 7 icebreakers that can muscle out of frozen berths when nothing else moves. Those hulls trace webbed ownership, Russian operators, foreign registries, Chinese financing, because sanctions taught everyone to diversify signatures. The goal isn't bragging rights, it's reliable molecules in January. Follow the satellites. Geoffin eyes, HY1 and HY2 ocean birds, and SAR buys from partners, China feeds on pictures. This forecasting isn't a hobby, it's a trading edge. If you can model flow drift and pressure fields day by day, you can time a convoy to beat a storm and price a cargo before a rival even knows the lane's open. Beijing doesn't need to own the corridor to tax it with information. But wait, there's more. Routing isn't binary. COSCO runs trans-Pacific lanes year-round. The Polar Silk Road is a seasonal overlay. Dual routing is the play. Use the NSR in a 100-120-day window when Asia prices are peaking and the weather cooperates, then fall back to the Pacific and Indian Ocean stacked the rest of the year. If the Arctic blinks, the mainline absorbs the shock. If it holds, you bank the arbitrage. Look at ports. Murmansk gets attention because it's deep and close to the Barents. Arkhangelsk shows up in memos as a development bet, a white sea node that could link rail and sea without Suez in the sentence. There's also a quiet eye on Kirkenes across the border in Norway, a concept to rail ore and containers to a fjord that never freezes, then hop into Arctic lanes when they open. None of this is headline stuff. It's optionality. Meanwhile, the gatekeeper knows who pays the bills. Rosatom and China built a subcommission to talk ship tech and NSR cooperation. Meetings don't move ice, but they set tone. Seasonal access with fewer surprises for Chinese hulls, maybe friendlier convoy slots for Arc 7s feeding Asian demand. And here's the thing, Moscow needs partners more than it admits. Sanctions thinned Western kit and cash. Chinese banks and shipyards fill gaps, but on terms that protect Beijing. People still ask, why not containers? Because schedules hate Arctic mood swings. Ultra-large box ships crave deep drafts, fixed berths, and 12-month calendars. The NSR offers none of that. So China frames containers as trials, not backbone. A handful of transits in a good year to learn pilots, ports, and paperwork. The real lift is LNG and condensate, point-to-point, high-value, ice-glass steel built to take a punch. That's where the math works, especially with Asia winter premiums and Russian discounts in the mix. Here's the crazy part, data is the cargo nobody sees. China's Earth observation program feeds Arctic forecasts. European firms pitch SAR scenes to anyone with a credit line. Russia's coastal picture fuses Harmony hydrophones with radar. And in Brussels, the pitch shifts to sovereignty, build non-Russian backbones, including future Arctic fiber, so Asian latency doesn't route through Moscow by default. Beijing reads that as both a challenge and an invitation. If Europe lays pipes that dodge Russia, China gets routes that can't be shut off with a phone call to Murmansk. Pricing power in Asia moves if the corridor holds over a season. Give it 120 workable days, and LNG desks in Shanghai, Dalian, and Busan can play delivery windows against Suez and the Cape. Miss that window, and the old map snaps back. That's why you see the duality in Chinese planning. Commit enough to shape outcomes, keep enough distance to walk if insurers, courts, or climate pull the rug. Micro story, a Chinese chartered Arc 7 leaves Sabeta late September with a tight delivery to floating storage unit off Kamchatka. The convoy slows, pressure ridges stacked overnight. Gayofen returns a strip showing a cleaner lead 5 miles north. The captain relays through the pilot, the breaker pivots, the convoy saves 12 hours. Onshore, a trader slips a cargo swap in Qingdao, front-running a competitor by a day. The profit isn't the route, it's the read. Now the risk. Western reinsurers eyeshadow operations, SDS in cold bays, AIS gaps near Kola and pool capacity. Letters of indemnity rise. Chinese state insurers and banks step in, but they price political risk their own way. One policy line dries up in London, another opens in Shanghai. If secondary sanctions bite deeper, Beijing downshifts, shifts lift to Pacific lanes, and keeps the Arctic as a pressure valve, not a primary. Plot twist, COSCO's public schedule might show nothing Arctic for a quarter, and still a dozen Chinese-linked cargoes move under different flags and managers, using Russian pilots, Russian ice, and Russian timing. It's a silent partnership because both sides need deniability. Moscow wants the narrative of national control. Beijing wants the leverage of access without the optics of dependence. So does China want to control the NSR? Not really. It wants something cleaner, predictable seasonal access, priority for energy, visibility on ice and escort queues, and a seat near the console where convoy timing gets set. Control is expensive. Influence, bought with satellites, cash, and guaranteed offtake, is cheaper and harder to sanction. If the corridor opens the way planners hope, even for 4 months, the center of gravity in Asian gas pricing nudges north. If it stutters, the lesson is the same. Build backups you own, rent the Arctic when it pays. And in the gap between those two paths, China's near-Arctic bet keeps paying in the one currency that matters most up here, options. Norway, Finland, and the cable nobody talks about. While gas and steel fight for lanes, something quieter is taking shape along the Barents Edge, piers, patrols, and a wire that could change who sets the clock. Northern Norway looks like empty coast until you see how the map bends global plans around it. Murmansk sits just east, Russia's Arctic door. West of that door, Tromsø to Kirkenes, is the EU's practical hinge on the high north. Start with ports. Hammerfest learned LNG tempo from Snøhvit years ago. Tromsø became the ops brain, staging tugs, SAR assets and winter pilots. But Kirkenes is the tease. Its fjord doesn't freeze, it's rail adjacent in concept if not yet in steel, and Chinese planners once sketched it as a western porch to the polar Silk Road. Norway listened, hesitated, and checked with allies. Because here's the thing, cargo isn't the only payload up here, data is. Brussels has a policy speech for almost everything, but in the Arctic they've learned the lesson the hard way. You need a backbone you don't have to ask Moscow to use. Enter the low-latency Arctic cable proposals. Europe to Asia, over the top, shaving milliseconds that high-frequency traders and cloud firms will pay for. On paper, it runs from northern Scandinavia, skirting Svalbard's neighborhood, across to Alaska, and onward to Asia. In practice, every kilometer needs permits, partners, and someone willing to anchor cash in frost and politics. So the EU did something concrete. In November 2025, under the Global Gateway banner, it pledged $12 billion to counter Sino-Russian grip points. Most people heard roads and ports. The fine print was sharper: digital corridors, customs data harmonization, and critical links that route around the gates Russia can close. As a proving move, Europe backed a 3-gigawatt subsea power cable across the Black Sea, from Georgia's planned deepwater port at Anaklia to Romania. Not the Arctic shore, but a test bed for east-west infrastructure that dodges the usual choke points and, more important, locks in sovereign control of the pipe. Here's where it gets interesting. This is financialized geography. Fund the pipe, move the price, weaken the gatekeeper. Now back north. Svalbard is a legal riddle wrapped in a treaty everyone quotes and few read closely. The Svalbard Treaty grants non-discriminatory access for economic activities and preserves scientific rights. That's why you can see international research installations on the archipelago and why satellite downlink dishes sprouted near Longyearbyen. But the treaty didn't imagine cloud backbones, and it didn't imagine an era where science data streams double as commercial lifelines. Norway says national law governs its telecom infrastructure there. Others push back, softly, with footnotes. Meanwhile, cables and ground stations turn science into the quiet artery for everything from climate models to AIS relays. Here's the crazy part. Even as the treaty anchors cooperation on the surface, the air above it gets weird. NATO's P-8 patrol planes trace straight lines in the Barents, listening hard. Merchant bridges near Kirkenes and Svalbard report GPS fixes that jump, spoofing bursts that move a ship icon sideways, then back. It doesn't take much. A half-mile jump near ice can turn a safe lane into a near miss. Crews learn to cross-check radar ranges and visual bearings like old hands, because the screen can lie. Unknown to most of the market, Norway and Finland are racing their own clocks. Finland sees itself as Europe's data porch to the east, already hosting big data centers that drink cheap Nordic power. Give them an Arctic cable that lands in Lapland and suddenly latency from Frankfurt to Tokyo doesn't route through St. Petersburg or along the Suez chain. That's not just speed, that's leverage. Helsinki bankers can sell it to funds as basis points. Brussels can sell it as sovereignty. Meanwhile, Moscow watches and reinforces. Those Sopka 2 radars we talked about, picture a chain of domes giving the coast a stitched view of sky and sea. At a 3.5-kilometer runway on Franz Joseph Land, confirmed in satellite imagery and defense briefings, which means long-range aircraft can stage medevacs, SAR, or, if needed, long patrol sorties farther forward. Tie that to Project Harmony on the seabed, and Russia's local picture gets even tighter. If a new cable skirts their watch, they'll still see the ships laying it, the buoys marking it, the workboats tending it. Visibility again, priced in. Norway's answer isn't to match platform for platform, it's to wire around. Build resilience in layers, redundancy in air patrols, better AIS reception, cross-border SAR with Finland, and crucially an information backbone that doesn't ask for Rosatom's calendar. The cable becomes the keystone. With it, the corridor is more than ships. It's an index. It's arbitrage. Banks price latency, and latency becomes trade. Micro story, a winter night off Vado. A trawler captain glances at his plotter and swears the fix jumped. He radios the Coast Guard. 20 minutes later, a P-8 drifts overhead, and the coast station confirms a spoofing burst. The trawler adjusts course by eye, clears a shoal by 2 cables, and files a report. Next morning, a telecom engineer in Tromsø circles a map. That patch of water is now a red box in a cable route planning dock. Not because of fish. Because of truth in the instruments. Here's where it all clicks. Steel and data share risk, but data multiplies value. A working Arctic cable tightens the loop between ice imagery, convoy timing, futures screens, and payment rails. If that pipe runs outside Russia's grasp, the Baltic and Barents stop being edges and start being hubs. If it doesn't, every ship that calls for an escort also calls, invisibly, for permission to speak. And the person who grants that permission doesn't just move ships. They set prices. LNG is the real engine, not containers. Containers love rhythm. Same berth, same crane gangs, same 12-month calendar. The Arctic doesn't care, the ice breathes. Windows open, then slam shut. That's death for box schedules. Miss a day at a hub, you ripple delays across 5 continents. So most carriers look at the NSR, do the math, and keep their ultra-larges where water is deep and predictable. LNG doesn't need that rhythm. It needs certainty at 2 ends and muscle in the middle. Point to point. Sabetta to a transshipment hub, hub to Asia. Arc 7 hulls with sloped bows, thickened plates, and azipod drives that can backandram through first-year ice when it forms a wall. They aren't pretty in a brochure, but they work when it's -20 and brash ice is pinging the shell like hail. Here's where it gets interesting. A gas cargo doesn't mind a 5-day convoy slowdown if the price screen in Shanghai is flashing a winter premium. Every hour you grind forward under escort, the spread improves. That's not true for a pallet of smartphones that needs to hit a retail slot in Hamburg next Tuesday. LNG is a trader's cargo. The Arctic is a trader's map. Watch how they built the system. On the west, the Kola Bay and Murmansk side handles transshipment, floating storage units or modern terminals where ARC-S offload into standard tankers that don't need ice teeth. On the east, Kamchatka plays the mirror. You crack the ice, reach the hub, then give the molecules to conventional steel for the last leg into Japan, Korea, or China. The Arc 7s cycle on the hard part. The rest of the fleet rides the open lanes. Price signals do the heavy lift. Asia's winter pulls demand just as European storage tightens, and Red Sea risk nudges ships around Africa. Layer in sanctions discounts on Russian molecules, and you get a math puzzle with a clear answer. Run the Arctic if the convoy holds and the off-take clock says yes. A $2.04 per MMBTU swing on delivery can cover escort fees, de-icing fuel, higher day rates, and still leave a cushion. Try getting that cushion with boxes that pay by the slot, not by the spike. Micro story, late October, a pair of Arc 7s push east in a thin convoy. The lead breaker calls 6 knots. Pressure ridges stack overnight near the New Siberian Islands. Onshore, a desk in Dalian watches Gaofen swathes and a European SAR by. The line of least resistance is a mile north of the planned track. The pilot hears from the breaker, nudges the lane, and they shave 10 hours. At the Kamchatka hub, a conventional LNGC lifts the cargo and sprints south. In Yokohama, a buyer pays the premium to land before a cold front. That gap, those 10 hours, is the trade. Meanwhile, containers keep flirting with the route. A handful of trials in a warm season, headlines about shaving days. Then the shoulder months arrive and 2 things happen. 1, ice returns faster than planned. 2, the queue forms behind priority energy cargoes. That's the quiet rule, gas first. You can't strand an off-take chain that feeds power plants. So the box ship that thought it would slip through finds itself idling, heaters on, schedule in pieces. The savings in miles morph into penalties at every downstream port. Here's the crazy part. The NSR's global trade route story sells headlines, but the backbone is energy. It's been that way since the first Soviet convoys hauled supplies along the coast, and since Yamal LNG poured concrete on the tundra. Steel, ore, and fertilizers add volume when markets smile. Containers add publicity. LNG and condensate pay the bills, season after season. Operators design around that reality. Arc 7 fleets get the best ice windows. They run with pilots who know every shoal that migrates under winter storms. Their maintenance cycles match convoy calendars. They carry spare parts teams hoard because sanctions made deliveries slow. They set up SDS plans at the hubs with tug crews drilled in sub-zero mooring, quick-release hooks, and hot water lines to keep hoses alive. When the pressure ridge tears paint, they fix it on the turn. It's a machine made for cold, not for pretty. And remember the insurance lens. A box ship stretching into the Arctic buys cover with caveats that can kill a schedule if anything blinks. An Arc 7 built for this environment, with polar code manuals drilled and crew that have logged winters here, looks cleaner to a cautious underwriter. Not cheap, just cleaner. P&I still watches. War Risk still adds a fee around blackout zones, but the class notation and the track record help. Now the midpoint gut punch. If LNG is king, the idea of the NSR as a broad Asia-Europe highway fades into a narrower, truer picture. It's an energy corridor with seasonal extras. That doesn't make it small, it makes it focused. And focus is why it keeps working while container talk comes and goes with each warm September. Here's the thing though, even LNG feels the ice changing. Thinner first-year ice forms faster, moves quicker, and piles into serrated ridges that don't read your plans. The same climate shift that tempted everyone north made the route more jumpy. You can plan around averages. You can't negotiate with a flow that decided to sprint across the fairway at 2 in the morning. So yes, LNG is the engine, but the engine runs only as long as the icebreaker queue holds, the escort fees pencil, and the hulls keep their teeth. Which sets up the next problem. If melting should help, why is it sometimes making the route harder? The climate paradox, thinner ice, harder route. So here's the twist everyone misses. Melting ice doesn't just make lanes, it makes trouble. The old multi-year slabs were thick, slow, and weirdly honest. You could read them. First-year ice, the thin stuff spreading wider each fall, forms fast, shatters easy, and moves like it has somewhere to be. It slides on a slick brine layer and catches wind like a sail. That speed turns a clean lead into a trap between breakfast and lunch. Picture a flow field at dusk. Yesterday it was loose plates with black water between. Overnight, the wind clocked 20 degrees and cranked up. The plates collide, buckle, and stand. Now you've got pressure ridges, ice slabs shoved upright, teeth pointing down as keels. They look like low walls, maybe a meter high above the surface. Underwater, their roots can bite 6-8 meters. An Arc 7 can shoulder through brash and skim thin sheets, but a ridge keel will rip paint, bend a prop blade, or punch a dent where a surveyor will put a gloved hand and frown. Thinner ice also breeds new ice blooms in hours. You clear a lane with a breaker in the morning. By afternoon, frasil crystals stitch it shut like lace. The bridge crew sees open water on a satellite still that's already stale. SA helps sure, but timing kills. You hit a reforming skim at speed, it thickens in your bow wake, and suddenly you're dragging slush that grabs the hull and spikes fuel burn. Slow down to save steel, and your convoy window narrows. Hurry and you risk riding up, getting pinched between flows that clamp your shoulders and flex your plates. Storm fetch is worse now too. Less anchored multi-year ice means more open stretches where wind can build waves. In autumn, low-pressure systems throw longer, heavier swell to ice edges. That swell rolls under first-year sheets, lifts them, drops them, and snaps them along fault lines. The breakage turns into rubble fields, chunks stacked at dumb angles, all sharp edges and hard surprises for a bulbous bow. You can hear it in the hull, a hollow thud, then a higher, meaner crackle that makes engineers glance at gauges. And the currents aren't steady friends. Fresh meltwater caps salt layers, density flips shelve and sink. Flow lines you trusted in August curve in September. A lead that ran straight last week now hooks behind a sandbar that moved under a storm. Hydrographic teams update charts, but the seabed here is alive. Ice keels plow furrows you can't see. A pilot will point at the echo sounder and say, "See that fuzz? That's trouble." Black carbon makes the feedback loop darker, literally. Soot from ships, flares and fires lands on snow, drops the albedo, and the surface warms faster. Thin ice thins more. It's the part nobody wants to own because regulation follows soot. Talk of tighter emission rules in polar waters gets louder every season. LNG carriers burn cleaner than old crude burners, but the scrutiny lands on everyone. Fuel quality, engine tuning, boiler vents, even de-icing practices if they throw heat the wrong way. Here's the crazy part. The shoulder seasons, the money windows, are also the danger zones. Early fall and late spring make planners greedy. The models say you've got a week. The weather says maybe 3 days. Pressure ridges love those edges. A hull breach they're small, contained, but public wouldn't just slow a convoy. It would freeze financing. P&I clubs would revisit Arctic clauses. Reinsurers would recalibrate their appetite. Class would harden survey intervals. And the queue, already tight, would crawl. Microstory, a westbound bulker with an ice belt rating, not Arc 7 but stout, rides a cleared lane near Severnaia Zemlya in October. Wind veers north overnight. At dawn, a field of thin floes slams the convoy's starboard side, funnels into a choke and lifts a hidden ridge. The breaker radios a speed drop. The bulker heaves, rattles, then shudders as the ridge keel kisses the turn of the bilge. No breach. Paint gone, a dent you can measure with your thumb, and a vibration the chief can't tune out. They make Murmansk. The surveyor marks localized deformation, monitor. The underwriter adds a note. The captain sleeps with one eye open for a month. Meanwhile, methane burps from thawing permafrost and shallow shelves complicate the climate math. Not a daily ops hazard, but a policy fuse. The more these signals stack, the more regulators lean in. Expect talk of polar emission control areas to return. Expect black carbon caps targeted at high latitudes. Expect pressure to slow down, to route wider, to prove every gram burned was worth it. That costs time, and time up here is the toll we said you pay or you quit. So yeah, melting tempted the world north, but the new ice it leaves behind is jumpy, sharp, and loud. The route didn't get easier, it got twitchy. You can still make it work. You just spend more on steel, on eyes in the sky, on patience, and on luck. And luck isn't a line item anyone can ensure. The legal gray zone Moscow wants you to forget. To understand why a convoy slot feels like a permission slip from a state, not a lane on a map, you have to hear the legal story Russia tells itself and everyone else. On most seas, the rulebook is UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. It draws lines, territorial sea, exclusive economic zone, and crucially, transit passage through international straits. If a narrow cut links 2 bits of high seas, ships pass without asking. That's the North Star for global trade. But here's the thing, Moscow says the Northern Sea route's narrowest cuts, like Vilkitsky and Sanikov, aren't international straits. They're historic internal waters, stitched into Russia long before this century's ice retreat. Under that view, the state can demand permits, pilots, fees, route approvals, the whole package, and you don't get to wave the transit passage flag. It's not an academic fight. It's the difference between you announcing your arrival and you politely asking to exist. Russia's other card is Article 234, the Ice-Covered Areas Clause in UNCLOS. It lets coastal states set and enforce pollution rules in ice that endangers navigation. For decades, that meant extra gear, special routing, and slower speeds. In Moscow's hands, it's become a lever. They read 234 broadly: if ice, then deeper control. And as climate makes ice thinner but twitchier, they argue the hazard remains, maybe worse. So the rules stick, and they bite. Freedom of navigation operations, the naval version of "we don't accept your claim," sound bold on think tank panels. In the Arctic, they meet physics. Warships don't advertise convoys, but they don't skate alone in rubble fields either. If you need an icebreaker to move, the legal point you're making gets blunted by the practical help you're taking. Nobody wants a misread between a Navy bridge and a Sopka 2 radar operator at 2 in the morning. Commercial ships sit in a softer box. On paper, foreign warships face stricter advance notice demands. Merchant traffic gets a path if it files paperwork and follows instructions. In practice, the permit regime swallows both. You submit your route plan, your timing, your insurance, your class. You accept pilots. You report more often than you breathe. Russia points to Article 234 and its historic waters claim and says these are reasonable safety measures. Operators sign because cargo needs moving. Lawyers grind their teeth. What nobody knew at the time, because it lives in memos, is how this gray zone lets Russia price uncertainty by design. If the law is foggy, the admin is king. Fees adjust. Slots appear or don't. A note about heightened ice hazard extends a window by 3 days. Your economics wobble, and someone on shore in Murmansk holds the pencil. Countermoves are forming. Brussels doesn't send destroyers, it wires alternatives. In November 2025, under the Global Gateway banner, The EU pledged $12 billion to harden non-Russian corridors, digital customs, overland links, and pointedly, data routes that don't depend on any coastal state's goodwill. The 3-gigawatt subsea power cable across the Black Sea, anchoring Anaklia to Romania, is the test case. Prove you can lay critical infrastructure around choke claims and then scale the logic to Arctic fiber. It's law through steel and electrons, not just notes verbals. Theory says as ice retreats, Russia's Article 234 case weakens. Less ice-covered area, less scope for special controls, but remember the climate paradox. Thinner ice moves faster and hits harder. Moscow argues hazard isn't vanishing, it's morphing. So if the legal hook thins, administrative practice thickens, more notices, more pilotage, more safety conditions that look a lot like control. Courts will chew that for years. Ships don't have years. Micro story, a Nordic operator files for an August window through Vilkitsky. The plan's tight, the cargo is clean, and the underwriter signs. The NSR administration replies with an approval, plus a new reporting interval and a pilot change at a mid-latitude waypoint. The captain shrugs. 2 weeks later, a storm pushes flows into the lane. The extra pilot swap forces a pause that burns a day. Not illegal, just decisive. On the balance sheet, that pause erases the distance saved. Meanwhile, papers pile up in law journals over whether Vilkitsky and Sannikov meet the textbook test for international straits, used for navigation between two parts of the high seas or an exclusive economic zone. Russia points to history and ice. Critics point to modern traffic and maps, but maps don't crack ridges and judges don't ride convoys. So industry does what it always does in a gray zone, it hedges. Some ships comply to the letter, some skirt edges in blackout pockets. Some don't sail. This was the moment everything changed for the pricing of the corridor, not a treaty, but a pledge and a practice. The EU's money signals a long game to route data outside Russian grasp. Russia's daily admin turns legal debate into leverage today. Between those poles, insurers try to write policies against rules that might shift with a forecast. Meaning, when law is fluid, certainty gets sold. In the Arctic, the vendor sits on the coast with a permit stamp and icebreaker roster. Here's the lie everyone buys: that distance equals speed. Up here, the price of time is whatever the gatekeeper says it is. If you think you can price a shortcut without pricing that stamp, you're buying the myth, not the lane. Sanctions, evasion, shadow fleets, and the Arctic pivot. So here's the seam where legality frays. When sanctions bit after 2022, older tankers didn't retire, they changed names. They flag-hopped to registries willing to look past quirks, shifted class to smaller societies, and drifted into a dark fleet that lives in grey water. The Arctic gave that fleet something rare: cover with fewer eyes. Start at Kildin and Kola Bay. Ship-to-ship transfers used to be a summer sport in warm anchorages. Up here, they happen in tight windows, with tugs nudging steel together under sleet. Hoses steam in the cold, quick-release hooks ice over, and crews work the headlamp because the polar night eats floodlights. AIS should tell the story. Instead, it blinks. A product tanker's signal pauses for 6 hours, then wakes up lighter. Paperwork shows a routine ballast shift. The cargo ledger shows a blend that didn't exist yesterday. Get ready for this: colder water hides sins. If a sheen slips under slush, it doesn't rainbow for a drone to spot. Thermal eyes stare, see uniform cold, and miss the thin line. That doesn't mean spills don't happen, it means attribution gets hard. And when attribution gets hard, letters of indemnity replace ironclad cover. A charterer says, if the insurer balks, we'll stand behind it. Fine, until 3 parties disagree on when the hose uncoupled and who locked the pressure drop. Spoofed positions make it worse. We've heard bridge crews call them teleport jumps. The plotter slides a mile east, then snaps back. Now imagine that jump during an STS. On paper, the ships never quite overlapped. In reality, fenders squealed at midnight while snow dusted the deck. Claims teams hate this, courts hate it more. Meanwhile, flag changes cascade. A tanker drops a well-known flag, picks up a small registry with fast paperwork, and sails with a new name stenciled in paint 2 shades off. Class shifts from a top-tier society to a lesser-known outfit that still has surveyors willing to travel. The hull didn't change. The perceived risk did. That risk gets priced into finance. Banks ask for higher margins, insurers carve out exclusions, and suddenly only state-backed players can touch the voyage math. Here's where the Arctic pivot shows up in ledger lines. SDS near Kildin or in remote Barents Cove's trims detection. In the bearing approaches, the same tricks apply, short hops from protected waters to a handoff zone, then a sprint into Pacific lanes before anyone compiles a clean track. If you can slip a discounted Russian blend into a neutral cargo stream without a neat public breadcrumb trail, buyers appear who'd never take it if every ping shouted the path. Now remember, the coastal picture isn't blind. Sopka 2 radars trace tracks, Project Harmony hears props. Russian coastal HQs can reconstruct a convoy lane from echoes. So while the public map shows gaps, the host state's archive fills them. That asymmetry is leverage. It can protect trades Moscow wants to protect. It can also hold receipts. Micro story: a 19-year-old Aframax creeps into a bay east of Murmansk at 20. The assisting tanker arrives late on AIS, but on time by local VHF. Fenders hang like tired lungs. Steam curls from hoses as cold metal flashes in the flood. 2 hours later, the Aframax drifts out 5 meters deeper, AIS still sleeping. A week on, she calls at a Mediterranean terminal under a new company name. Compliance officers scan the file. The track looks clean. The refinery manager shrugs. Paper clears, molecules move. But here's the thing, this isn't costless. Winter SDS has razor margins. A burst hose at -15 freezes into a club you can't bend. Ice accretes on deck, men slip, valves seize. Tugmasters fight swell that sneaks around headlands. A minor scrape in August is a disabling dent in January. Spill response, limited at best. Booms ice over, skimmers clog. Helicopters have shorter windows. Liability chains stretch from a shell firm in Dubai to a PO box in Limassol to a broker in Hong Kong. Try serving papers in a blizzard. Secondary sanctions keep tightening the vice. A reinsurer in Zurich doesn't want retrocession lines touching a dark fleet pool. London underwriters tag heightened risk areas at Arctic choke points. Tokyo reads OFAC footnotes like scripture. Capacity exits, premiums spike, and shadow operators step in with self-insurance tied to Moscow or to front companies with deep political shade. Transparency thins further. Plot twist: the Arctic makes some shadow tricks safer to stage, fewer eyes, colder cover, but raises operational stakes. A small spill stays unseen longer, but a big one lasts longer and costs more under ice. The same darkness that hides a transfer hides the moment you need help, and the help you need moves on Rosatom's calendar. Unknown to many, this dark trade loops back into prices you feel. When discounted barrels move north, official volumes south wobble, benchmarks drift, ports downline juggle unplanned arrivals. Clean players pay more for insurance because dirty flows fog the stats that actuaries crave. It's not just law, it's math. So who actually wins if this corridor scales under shadow? Not who you think. Middlemen with the best visibility sell timing, not oil. Satellite firms selling SAR to private desks make steady fees. Gatekeepers rent out silence. Honest operators pay higher premiums for someone else's blackout. And the route's public promise, shorter, cleaner, faster, quietly tilts to a private product, colder, murkier, riskier, profitable for a few. Here's the crazy part. The Arctic pivot isn't just a plan B for sanctioned cargo, it's a pricing lab. If you can manage the ice, the escorts, the permits, and the dark spaces, you can print optionality. But stack one casualty in winter on top of a sanctions probe, and that lab gets shuttered overnight. Convoys slow, insurers trim lines again. The shadow fleet retreats to warmer coves, and the corridor's myth of frictionless distance meets the bill everyone tried not to read. Plot twist: the shorter route was never the product. The product is time you can ration and sell. Winners, losers, and the $12 trillion math. So who cashes in when a route is shorter but slower, riskier, and rationed by a gatekeeper? Here's where it gets interesting. Winners first. LNG exporters with Arc 7 capacity live at the front of the line. Every convoy that forms with a gas carrier at the nose is a small dividend to projects built exactly for this grind, YAML and its spin-offs feeding those Kamchatka and Kola transshipment hubs. Their edge isn't just steel, it's choreography. They've got pilots who know the pressure points, SDS crews drilled for -20, and off-take desks that can sell a 12-hour gain into a winter premium. When the ice tightens, their priority becomes policy, not rumor. Right behind them, satellite data vendors and the people who fuse signals into something tradable. SAR scenes that cut through polar night. Thermal strips that catch a convoy lane warming. Chinese constellations adding cadence. European scenes adding resolution. Brokers stitch it into ghost tracks, sell it to desks timing flows, and charge subscription instead of praying for freight. Visibility is the currency, they mint it. Arctic ports, if they sit on the right side of the gate, get steady lift. Murmansk and Kola for westbound transshipment, Kamchatka for eastbound handoffs. Tug firms with winter teams, terminal operators with de-icing rigs, survey outfits with crews willing to sound fairways in sleet. They all get paid every time an Arc 7 kisses a berth and a conventional tanker takes the baton. Norway's bunkering and service nodes on the Barents Rim get conditional wins too, if politics and permits line up. Conditional winners stretch farther south. China's northeast ports, Dalian, Qingdao, catch cargoes earlier when the NSR holds, and their utilities get gas that jump the Suez queue. South Korean yards that can still turn out polar-capable hulls and critical modules get orders Western yards lost to sanctions. Insurers and banks in Shanghai and Hong Kong pick up lines London and Zurich trimmed. Even Finland's data dreams get a nudge if an Arctic cable lands and latency to Asia drops without touching Russian soil. Losers start with the Suez Canal Authority and anyone who makes money off ships stacking in the Red Sea lane. Every cargo that clears the Arctic window trims a toll and shaves days of bunker and brokerage in places that used to be mandatory. Singapore's stickiness as the default Asia hub takes small nicks when Kamchatka and Far East Russian ports act as seasonal handoff points, even if Changi's deep services still own the other 8 months. Traditional insurers take hits in 2 ways. They lose good premium to state-backed rivals who will write Arctic risk, and they inherit worse risk on the remaining, less prepared ships that try to squeeze through the window without the right steel or track record. The international group clubs keep discipline, but the shadow of letters of indemnity and non-IG cover hovers over grey cargoes. That fog isn't free. It shows up as higher prices for honest tonnage. Now the elasticity check. Shaving 10-15 days looks great on a slide. Then convoy weights eat 4 to 6 of them. Add escort, pilotage, hydrographic and winterization costs. The savings fade fast unless your cargo pays for timing. LNG and condensate do. Bulk sometimes does. Ore and fertilizers when spreads smile. Containers rarely do, because one missed berth on a fixed global rotation nukes the math. Sensitivity matters more than averages. Put Brent at a level where Asia is pulling hard and Russian discounts are deep enough to stomach fees, and the route lights up, especially September through November. Drop prices, trim volatility, and suddenly the convoy days don't pencil. Same with weather. An early ridge season that tacks 48 hours onto each leg can erase the gap. A warm, calm October can turn 3 Arc 7 cycles into 4, and that 4th cycle is pure margin. Micro story, a trader in Busan watches a cold front slam Hokkaido. Spot LNG spikes. An Arc 7 at Sabeta gets a green light into a tight convoy. The desk pays up for a Kamchatka handoff, locks a downstream slot in Yokohama, and sells the arrival 2 days earlier than the rival who routed via Suez. The rival saved fees. The Arc 7 owner sold winter, not miles. Winner, the one who owned ice glass capacity and the phone number that matters in Murmansk. Here's the twist. The $12 trillion headline isn't a pile of gold under the floes. It's leverage across slices of the economy that care about time, certainty, and control. Energy flows first. Metals when spreads widen. Data always, if Europe funds a backbone that doesn't need a Russian plug. The EU's $12 billion Global Gateway Pledge in November 2025 wasn't charity. It was a map edit, digital customs, overland links, and test beds like the 3-gigawatt Black Sea cable to prove you can build critical pipes that dodge gatekeepers. If that logic extends to Arctic fiber, latency itself becomes a commodity European funds can sell back to Asia. That's financialized geography. Lay steel, move spreads. So winners are those who can turn controlled scarcity into premium. Losers are those who mistake a shorter line on a map for a cheaper life in practice. Everyone else sits in the middle, counting days, watching satellites, praying the one thing that can end the argument. A major casualty with pollution and loss of life doesn't land in their season. Plot twist, Even if that worst day never comes, the stalemate breaks three ways: icebreaker supply, a single headline incident, or a data backbone that makes routing and finance real time. Two of those are moving now, which means the math you wrote last year might not hold by the first frost. The three things that decide the corridor's fate. So strip out the noise. The corridor lives or dies on three things: icebreakers, a bad day, and a data spine. Miss anyone for long enough, the map snaps back to Suez and the Cape. Start with steel that breaks ice. Rosatomflot's nuclear fleet is the metronome here, Arctica-class workhorses, and the newer LK-60Ys that carve lanes wider and faster than anything else afloat. But even a nuclear breaker ages. Dry dock cycles, reactor overhauls, hull fatigue from years of ramming ridges. These aren't footnotes, they're the calendar. Zvezda's build line is supposed to close the gap with more hulls and bigger muscle, but schedules slip, components bottleneck, and sanctions make specialized parts a scavenger hunt. Meanwhile, demand climbs because LNG programs aren't pausing for procurement delays. Here's the thing about capacity. It's not how many icebreakers you boast on a podium. It's how many convoy days you can deliver between September and November when spreads pay. Factor weather holds, medevacs, SAR diversions, and mandatory maintenance. Now do bottleneck math. Each breaker can shepherd only so many hulls, each hull only makes so many cycles, and one unexpected ridge field can steal a day from an entire line behind it. The graph that sells 50 million tons by year X doesn't show the week you lost to a cracked prop on the lead ship. Micro story: a convoy sits 2 hours east of Vilkitsky. The lead breaker takes a glancing blow on a keel that hides deeper than the surface suggests. A vibration creeps into the shaft. The captain throttles down, calls for inspection, and the whole line shaves 2 knots for 12 hours. Onshore, a trader's edge in Busan evaporates. Multiply that by a season. Now the second lever, the bad day that resets appetite. The route doesn't need frequent accidents to fail, it needs one ugly one. Picture it: shoulder season, an Arc 5 bulker, not Arc 7, squeezes a weather window behind an LNG conv. Pressure rises faster than forecast. The escort's track narrows and a ridge sneaks into the lane. A plate dents inward, a seam opens, water finds a path. No spectacular footage, just a slow, cold problem in failing light. That's when the paperwork avalanche begins. P&I clubs open special reserves, war risk underwriters tighten clauses, and reinsurers in London and Zurich cut aggregate exposure until someone can price what went wrong. Class societies harden requirements: more winter drills, more steel in the belt, tighter survey intervals, stricter reporting. Rosatom reviews escort rules and widens safety margins that were already thin. Convoys slow to be safe. Slots vanish. The operators still willing to sail find their premiums doubled and their lenders cautious. A season later, the LNG cycles resume because they must. But the fringe bulk, trial containers, opportunistic product falls away for 2 years. Here's where it gets interesting. That same bad day could involve a spill under ice. In cold water, response crawls, booms ice over, skimmers clog, daylight is short. A slick that would be contained in the Gulf lingers unseen along a pressure field. Lawsuits stack in 3 languages. Regulators wake up. Article 234 arguments gain punch. Every arga for looser Arctic rules loses the room. The corridor still exists. It just belongs even more to state-backed players with deep pockets and political cover. Third lever, the data spine. Visibility isn't a luxury, it's the only way to compress risk. Right now, the picture's split. Public trackers blink at choke points while Russia's coastal net, Sopka 2 domes, coastal AIS, and Project Harmony's seabed array keeps a sovereign view. Satellite firms sell SAR and thermal, Chinese constellations add cadence, but without a backbone to move that data with low latency and sovereign control, finance can't wire decisions fast enough. Into the quiet race to wire the top of the world. A true Arctic fiber that links Scandinavia to Alaska and onward to Asia, tied into polar sat relays, turns ghost tracks into tradable timelines. Pair that with Brussels' global gateway money, the $12 billion pledge in November 2025, and the proving move of a 3-gigawatt Black Sea power cable, and you see the playbook: build pipes that route around gatekeepers. If an Arctic cable lands on EU turf and feeds Finnish and Norwegian nodes, latency for ice maps, Conv, orders, hedging and payments drops. Banks write smarter lines. Insurers price verified tracks. Port operators stage gear to the hour, not the day. The corridor stops being a rumor and becomes a schedule. Here's where it gets interesting. Control the wire and you shift who prices the weight. But here's the catch. That backbone only matters if Moscow lets steel move. Data can shorten decisions, it can't melt ridges or conjure an escort, which is why these three levers braid. Enough icebreaker cycles, no headline casualty, and a wired Arctic together shift the route from seasonal gamble to seasonal habit. Miss the build curve, suffer one bad winter incident, or keep the Arctic dark, and the habit never forms. Plot twist, two of the three are lining up sooner than most think. Icebreaker capacity will bump as Zvezda deliveries creep online and older hulls squeeze extra seasons. The data spine is inching forward as Europe throws money at non-Russian links and private constellations flood the pole with SAR. That leaves the coin toss nobody controls, the bad day. If winter ices over without major casualty, the corridor's grip on LNG tightens and the queue hardens into policy. If it doesn't, the market resets, and distance on the map goes back to being a story people tell between storms. The shadow play, military, drones, and quiet red lines. While traders chase spreads, another clock runs under the ice. Russia's northern fleet treats the NSR like a lifeline and a shield. Along the arc from Franz Joseph Land to Novaya Zemlya to the New Siberian Islands, runways have woken up, garrisons thickened, and radar sites stitched the horizon together. It looks like commerce up here. It feels like deterrence. Start on the islands that barely touch the sun. Nagaskoy on Franz Joseph Land now fields a 3.5-kilometer runway, long enough to take heavy transports, medevac birds, and long-range patrol aircraft that can loiter where convoys slow. Push south to Novaya Zemlya, and you find updated air defense rings, the kind that make pilots measure their words and their headings. East, on Kotany and Rangel, the airstrips and pads are back in service. A decade ago, they were ghost posts. Today, they're the scaffolding of a forward network. Here's where it gets interesting. Sopka 2 radars, those white protective domes, dot the coast, handing off targets the way cell towers hand your phone. Civilian air traffic gets guidance. Military watch floors get a theater-wide picture of every wing, rotor, and hull that breaks the line. Add coastal over the horizon sets, and the surface picture hardens. You can't sneak a convoy through pressure ridges, and you can't sneak a patrol past a stitched radar belt either. Meanwhile, the seabed listens. Project Harmony, Russia's hidden underwater array, runs like a quiet fence from Murmansk toward Franz Joseph Land. Hydrophones, seabed nodes, fiber spurs, pieces that hear screws, count prop blades, and triangulate motion even when AIS goes dark. It started as a bastion shield, protect SSBNs under the pack ice, keep the second strike boats safe. But the dual use is baked in. Merchant screws sing too. Harmony hears both songs. Drones turn it all into one loop. Civilian ice monitoring feeds, SAT-SAR, thermal strips, microwave sounders, pipe into coastal HQs. ISR drones ride those same paths, wearing the label environmental monitoring, then task shadow a hull with a suspect draft or a convict hugging a lead. One picture serves two masters. Pilots con a ship away from pressure ridges. Watch officers flag a contact of interest for later. Bridge crews feel the edge of it. GPS starts to wander near Kirkenes or around Svalbard. A fix jumps sideways, then snaps back, spoofing bursts that test who's sailing by the screen and who's sailing by the sea. The smart crews cross-check ranges and bearings, talk to pilots, and slow down before a ridge or a shoal turns a jump into a dent. No one claims it, everyone adjusts. Submarines stay off camera, but the doctrine is old and simple: bastion defense. Park the ballistic missile boats under hard ice north of the Kola, shielded by air defenses, quieted by water that hates sonar, and dare anyone to come close. That's the red line nobody writes down. Commerce shares the canopy with a nuclear backstop. Misreads aren't allowed. Micro story: a westbound convoy slows near Vilkitsky in a blue twilight. The breaker calls 5 knots, a ridge scar laces the lane ahead. On VHF, a calm voice tags itself as Ice Center. Weather update: pressure rising, recommend offset north by 4 cables. The pilot nods. Up on the ice edge, a drone hangs like a star. 200 miles away, a coastal watch floor logs the adjustment. On another screen, a submarine track plot updates a confidence ring. One note moves 3 different timelines. Unknown to the world beyond the map, that's the daily bargain. Commerce buys safety, safety buys visibility, visibility buys control. Norway and NATO answer in layers, P-8s tracing racetracks over the Barents, allied subs stalking seams, patrols that never name the line but know where it is. Each move is calibrated not to crack the ice underfoot. And here's the thing, this feels stable until it is. A drone strays too near a radar dome. A spoofing burst tips a merchant too close to a shoal. A medevac launch crosses a patrol track at the wrong second. The system absorbs thousands of these near misses and calls them routine. Then one day, a nudge becomes a headline. Meaning the corridor's real currency isn't miles, it's thresholds. Cross one, and ships don't just wait for icebreakers, they wait for clearances no one will write on paper. The bill for that delay doesn't arrive at a toll booth. It arrives when a desk in Murmansk pauses a conv, and a desk in Brussels reprices the risk. In the shadow play, the hand that controls the picture controls the pace. And pace, up here, is power. Case study, 1 ship, 1 season, real costs. Call it a working season in 4 acts. Ship, an Arc 7 LNG carrier, fresh off a yard cycle, crew that's logged winters, manuals dog-eared. Window, July to October. Cargo, winter value in a summer hull. Act I is paperwork. The operator files the route months out, entry dates, convoy preferences, pilotage requests, SDS plans for Kamchatka, westbound backup to Kola. Permits bounce between desks, approvals land with conditions, reporting intervals, escort class, a reminder about blackout zones and war risk notifications. Insurance rides shotgun, P&I confirms cover with Arctic clauses, hull underwriters flag shoulder season limits, war risk adds a surcharge near Vilkitsky and Sanikov. Bank compliance scans every affiliate on the charter chain. One query pings a supplier, it clears after a week. The clock already moved. Act II is the first lift. July ice is kind, but rules don't bend. The convoy forms at the Kara gate. The breaker calls 7 knots. Fuel burn sits high, de-icing lines run warm, hotel loads fat from radar and heaters. Fees start ticking, escort day rate, pilot shifts, hydrographic services, comms. A ridge smear steals 6 hours near Severnaya Zemlya. Not drama, just math. In Sabeta, loading slips are tied because a crane froze overnight. Crew logs lengthen, rest cycles thread needles. The ship still makes the Kamchatka hub on a tight window. SDS teams meet in a dusk that never gets dark. Hoses thaw with hot water, manifolds sweat, tugs hum, transfer clean. A conventional LNGC sprints south. The Arc 7 turns. Act III is where steel earns pay. September brings pressure. New ice stitches lanes by afternoon. The breaker widens cuts. The convoy slows. A brash field pings the shell like gravel. A pod hiccups. The chief notes a spike, then a smooth. Underwriters will read that line later. Insurance wants telemetry. The back office emails logs. Meanwhile, a letter of undertaking shows up from a buyer's bank. Insurance gap hedged on paper. The operator signs because cargo must move. A storm lifts long swell into an edge zone. Rubble stacks. The pilot threads a new lead 5 cables north. Hours saved that someone in Dalian already sold forward. Act IV is the shoulder season gamble. Early October, a cold snap hardens patches overnight. A convoy wait forms, 2 dry bulkers behind, 3 gas ships ahead. ARCs get priority, fees thin the margin, but Asia's screen flashes a premium that covers it. On the last eastbound, a ridge kisses the bow flare and scuffs paint. No dent, but surveys now require a closer look on return. In Kola, the westbound backup SDS drills in sleet, tugs ice up, lines creak, quick-release hooks get de-iced with steam. The crew sleeps in snatches. Bottom line, distance saved is real, but the cash burns in queues, escorts, surveys, and caution. It pencils when pricing pays for timing and when the queue moves on your schedule. It fails when ice writes its own. Forecast, 5-year scenarios, and the inflection point. So what does the next 5 years actually look like when you strip away slogans and stare at calendars, ice charts, and balance sheets? Think in 3 lanes, base case, upside, and downside. Then overlay the clock, the inflection point where one headline or one delivery slips the whole curve. Base case first. LNG holds the wheel. You get gradual scale, not a stampede. Arc 7 fleets keep cycling between Sabetta, Kola, and Kamchatka with shoulder season caution and mid-season rhythm. Container trials pop up in warm windows, 5 here, 10 there, mostly for learning, not for line haul. Bulkers dip in when spreads are sweet and escort slots exist, then fade when winter talks louder. Seasonality stays stubborn, a reliable window measured in low hundreds of days, with real weeks lost to pressure ridges and storm fetch in September and October. Administratively, Russia keeps the Permatan pilot gate tight, citing safety and ice under Article 234, even as its legal footing thins with retreating multi-year ice. Insurers creep back at the edges where risk is measured, Arc 7s with spotless records, documented escorts, telemetry shared. Everyone else pays more, waits more, or stays south. Now the upside, and it's not fantasy, just tight choreography. Zvezda's delivery schedule nudges icebreaker capacity up a notch, life extension refits squeeze extra seasons from the nuclear fleet, and Rosatomflot's dispatch chops improve. That turns 3 LNG cycles into 4 for a handful of hulls in a good October, which sounds small until you price the extra arrival before a cold front. Pair that with a data jump. An Arctic fiber segment actually lands on Nordic soil, tied into Finland's data parks, and private constellations pump hourly SAR and thermal up the pole. Latency drops for ice forecasts, convoy orders, hedges, and payment rails. Banks write smarter lines. Underwriters price verified tracks. Queue times tighten because dispatchers see problems 12 hours earlier. Add one more piece, Chinese co-finance that backstops modules, charter lines, and port rigs Moscow can't source from the West. The Polar Silk Road subcommission greases conv, timing for energy lifts into Asia's winter pull. In that mix, a Red Sea flare-up or a Suez drought reroute makes the NSR not just attractive, but necessary for a quarter. You don't get a revolution. You get seasonal habit on firmer legs, and pricing power nudges north every fall. Downside is simpler and meaner. One casualty in a shoulder season, pollution plus loss of life, and appetite resets overnight. P&I clubs harden Arctic clauses, reinsurers in London and Zurich slash aggregate exposure, class tightens surveys, and Rosatom widens safety margins that were already thin. Convoys slow, slots vanish, and only state-backed players can swim in the new pool. Secondary sanctions ratchet. An OFAC footnote takes out a financing node in Dubai. An EU directive yanks a class stamp from a helpful society. Shadow fleets drift north to hide in blackout pockets, then drift away when winter makes SDS a blood sport. A legal pushback gains teeth, notes verbals multiply, and a quiet FONOP near the Bering Strait tests messages without testing ice. The market does what markets do. It writes off the route for 2 seasons, defaults to the Cape when the Red Sea runs hot, and remembers the Arctic only when Asia's screen screams winter emergency. Here's the inflection point where paths split, choke points and clocks. Watch 4 names like watch weather, Kara Gate, Vilkitsky, Sanikov, Bering Strait. If a warm October gives you clean passes at Kara and Vilkitsky 2 years in a row, operators start planning on it, not praying for it. If Sanikov scripts 2 ridge snarls in a single season, the habit breaks. Bering is the valve to the Pacific, a bout of GPS spoofing that forces repeated slowdowns that turns a 12-day gain into noise. Each choke point is a lever. Each lever flips the season from "we'll take it" to "we'll wait." Investors need to look where spreadsheets rarely look. Who funds the ice? Rosatom's capex and Zvezda's cadence are public enough to model, but the real alpha hides in dispatch efficiency and refit yards that can quietly keep propellers and pods alive. Who ensures it? IG Club circulars, war risk advisories, and reinsurance chatter in Zurich tell you which windows are actually insurable. Who provides the picture? SAR vendors with Arctic revisit times under 6 hours, Chinese constellations with dependable tasking, and the first cable consortium that gets a permit stack signed north of Tromsø. Back those with off-takers who will pay a premium for day-certain arrivals in October, and you're not speculating, you're buying a seasonal machine. 3 signals will tell you which scenario is taking hold. Signal 1, a public schedule from Rosatomflot that shows higher convoy frequency, and then they hit it for 2 consecutive seasons. That's not PR, that's a metronome. Signal 2, an EU-backed Arctic cable tranche reaches financial close with Nordic landfalls locked, and at least one hyperscaler books capacity. When storage and compute prepay for speed, you've got a spine. Signal 3, an incident that doesn't happen. If we go 2 shoulder seasons without a headline casualty, and without a major STS mishap in the Barents or off Kamchatka, underwriters open a little more, banks shade down margins, and operators shift from trial to plan. Microstory, October, Year 3. A mild storm season, 2 Zvezda deliveries online, and a Finnish landing station lights up a new northbound fiber. Rosatomflot posts convoy windows, and for once, reality matches the table. In Dalian, a desk buys a cargo on the promise of a 14-day cycle, because last October it was 15, and the new schedule says 13 to 15 is normal. In Zurich, a reinsurer reopens a narrow Arctic line for ARC-7s with verified telemetry feeds. In Busan, a yard manager gets a call about another ice-class order. No speeches, just momentum. Now the caution, all that progress rides on the coin toss, the bad day. The corridor doesn't fail from a lack of PowerPoint. It fails from one dent that leaks for 12 hours under new ice, filmed by no one and priced by everyone. If we hit that day, the 5-year story shifts to repair and retreat. If we don't, LNG makes the habit stick, data makes it smarter, and icebreakers make it repeatable. So the inflection point isn't a single date. It's a season that repeats, 2 in a row without a crack in the picture, and this stops being a stunt and becomes a line item in Asia's winter plan. Miss it, and distance on a map goes back to being a story told under warm lights, far from the sound of ice hitting steel. Historical context window. Go back a century. Tsarist dreamers talked about a northern postal route, but it was the Soviets who turned fantasy into an office with a stamp. In 1932, they stood up the Northern Sea Route Administration, dispatches, charts, and a promise that ice wouldn't stop the plan. It wasn't romance, it was supply. Gulag camps, weather stations, nickel mines, ships in convoy hugging the coast, season after season. By the 1970s, the Cold War put reactors in the ice. The nuclear Arctica class didn't need to refuel like diesel. They carved lanes through slabs that would have laughed at older hulls. The model set then still echoes now, the convoy as system, a lead breaker, pilots who knew every shoal and sandbar that wandered under storms. Cargo geared for the destination, not the schedule, fuel, or timber parts people. It was never a global highway. It was a lifeline built inland, facing out. After 2000, the oil and gas arc took over. Geologists had the maps. YAML got the money. Concrete poured on permafrost, and a new idea took hold in boardrooms far away. Sell the build as a trade corridor, not just a resource belt. Here's the thing, they didn't lie about distance. They just sold the wrong product. The icebreakers, piers, and permits were always tuned for energy flows. Containers showed up in the brochures, because a box ship in blue water sells better than a gas carrier in grey dawn. Then came the climate optics. A warm September, satellite photos of blue where white used to be, and the phrase 40% shorter started doing laps. Meanwhile, the dispatchers never stopped doing what the Soviets taught them. Meter the queue, protect the cargoes that matter, and call it safety when the world asks why. That's the root of today's story. The infrastructure was baked for energy and control, and the pitch was repackaged as global trade. Melting ice let the pitch land. It didn't change the recipe. Which brings us back to now. The same nuclear fleet Rosatomflot runs, the same convoy logic, the same coastal eyes, Sopka 2 domes, seabed ears are all descendants of that first office with a stamp. The label shifted from 5-year plan to Polar Silk Road, but the function stayed. Keep the lifeline open, charge for certainty, and let the rest of the world argue over maps while you run the ice like a factory. Plot twist, the global trade route pitch was the wrapper. The product has always been ration time. The $12 trillion corridor isn't a highway, it's a gate, and the person holding the key sets the price of time. If you want more map-driven stories money would rather avoid, hit subscribe, turn on alerts, and share this with someone who still thinks the Arctic is empty. Drop your questions below, your best ones build our next investigation. Watch the next episode to see where this gate meets the cables under your feet.